We are joined this evening by Kayleigh Warren. Kayleigh is from the Tewa and Tiwa from the pueblos of Santa Clara and Isleta. She was raised in the traditional Pueblo farming lifeway in Santa Clara Pueblo. Her land-based upbringing, as well as through community and professional mentorship, from her land-based upbringing, as well as through community and professional mentorship, she has focused on becoming an advocate for ancestral lands protection and the preservation of Pueblo land-based lifeways, especially farming and ethnobotanical traditions. She has worked in native plants preservation, monitoring and cultivating threatened and endangered plant species in Western Oregon and Southern New Mexico, and in supporting Indigenous food sovereignty initiatives in communities across the country. Her undergraduate studies were focused on botany and ecology. Outside of the office, Kayleigh spends her time preparing and promoting traditional foods, seed keeping, tending her family's fields and gardens in Santa Clara Pueblo, and continually learning about and loving on the flora in her homelands. Thank you, Kayleigh, so much for joining us this evening. And I'm going to go ahead and give it to you, over to you, and monitor the chat for questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kristen. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Kristen. I appreciate it. And it's great to be here with Peak and with all of you. I'm really excited to tell some stories tonight about the Española Healing Foods Oasis and share a bit of the work that's brought the space into being, what's happening currently, and the next phases that we're beginning to dream into. And also to provide some information about how to support and get involved with the garden. So without further ado, I'll do just that. So our presentation is called Seeding the Española Healing Foods Oasis, because again, the main piece of this talk tonight is talking about what brought this space into being, all of the work, both physically and in terms of the dreaming and the visioning and the condensing of intentions that brought it into a place that we can all visit today, and that brings us so much. To begin with, I'll also just reiterate that I work with Tewa Women United, which is a community nonprofit based in Española. We, along with the city of Española, are the sponsors of the Española Healing Foods Oasis and its caretakers. So to start with, what is the Healing Foods Oasis? So I mentioned already, the Healing Foods Oasis, or as we call it, the EHFO, is a community garden with edible, medicinal, dye, and pollinator attracting plants and trees situated on a slope downhill from Española City Hall within Valdez Park in Española. It's an educational space and demonstration site for Indigenous agriculture, specifically centered on Pueblo, high desert, Tewa agricultural ways from here, our place, agroecology, xeriscaping, rainwater harvesting, bioremediation, and so much more. Outside of that, as I've sort of alluded to already, there's lots of intentions and deeper values that have also been planted in this space, and it is representative of a value system and lifeways that are central to northern New Mexico. All of these sort of deeper values and ways of being are very rooted into how we maintain the space, how we plan what's planted there, and how we look towards the future. So if you look at the left side of the screen, you're going to see some of our values that we have for the Healing Foods Oasis, which includes planting, water harvesting, sharing, stewardship in the short and long term, prayer, saving seeds, soil building, and harvesting. We wanted to provide also some regional context. Again, as I've mentioned, a huge importance of our work at the Healing Foods Oasis is representing land-based lifeways in northern New Mexico. This is definitely informed by Pueblo agricultural lifeways, that are situated in close proximity to what is Española. So the three communities that represents are San Ildefonso, Santa Clara, and Okewinge Pueblos. I myself am from Santa Clara Pueblo, as well as Isleta Pueblo, which is south, more close to Albuquerque. But I was raised in Santa Clara and raised farming here. Our traditional language also of all of the villages mentioned is Tewa. And this is important context. The Healing Foods Oasis is situated in the upper Rio Grande Basin. We're quite close to the Rio Grande itself. The space where the garden is now was once a site of an acequia, or a ditch that was fed by the Rio Grande. And so we really like to call, the history of the space and the caretakers and Indigenous folks to this land into the larger context of the Healing Foods Oasis, not only because of its actual location, physical location, but because of, the ways of growing and the ways of being that contribute to its mission, and also those who have physically been part of bringing it to life, have all been, land-based community folks here in the Española Valley. So our mission at the Healing Foods Oasis is to regenerate neglected land and provide a garden of edible, medicinal, and dye plants that models beneficial Indigenous water harvesting, soil building, and cultivation techniques, while providing accessible sustenance for all, human and animal, members of the community. Our values are that we believe in the power of connection between people and place, the wisdom of Indigenous foodways, water harvesting, medicinal herb cultivation, and ceremony, centered around the healing potential of plants. The EHFO recognizes all land as sacred with Indigenous roots and celebrates the possibility of catalyzing reverence for and stewardship of land through collective community care. So these are our roots, and this is the place we like to start whenever we're telling the story about the Healing Foods Oasis, because it's more than a community garden. It's more than a pollinator garden. It's really a representation of community itself, both our communities of people and the different cultural lifeways in northern New Mexico, but the native ecosystems here. It's all condensed in one space of sort of celebration and healing. And so this is as important to us to talk about as it is talking about the plants or how the garden was created. The other important piece we wanted to share about are the organizations behind the EHFO. So as I mentioned, the two caretakers and sponsors of the EHFO are Tewa Women United, or TWU. TWU is a community organization that was founded in the 80s and is currently founded by and is currently led by Tewa women belonging to the three Pueblo communities closest to Española. We envision movements rooted in Inha, which is breath of heart life, Inal, touching heart and spirit, that nurture and celebrate the collective power of beloved families, communities, and Nalochicuyo, which is our Earth Mother. TWU's Environmental Health and Justice program leads the care and community engagement efforts at the EHFO. And we want to also acknowledge the city of Española. The Healing Foods Oasis resides on land owned by the city of Española, and the city is a partner and has provided invaluable, advice and technical support in the development of the oasis itself. So another piece we wanted to talk through is why create the EHFO. So as I've mentioned before, we identify the EHFO as a community garden. And if we're looking at the benefits of a community garden, it's a long list. So looking at our graphic here, some examples of that are, creating opportunity for recreation, exercise, therapy, and education, preserving green space, improving quality of life for folks engaging with the garden, providing, nutritious food, reducing family food budgets, encouraging, positive social interaction between folks in the community, and so much more. There are so many benefits to a community garden that we recognize, especially in, communities like Española, which have their difficulties. And it's really important to us in our philosophy around the Healing Foods Oasis, that we acknowledge that, and that we acknowledge the healing power of having, positive spaces where, our communities that are in healing can interact with the land, can interact with, whole foods and, deep nourishment in a, community collective space. And just the tremendous, ripple effects that can, positive ripple effects that sends out to the community. That's another really important piece to us. So we have all of the typical benefits of a community garden, right? But the EHFO itself has its own specific purposes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the physical location of the garden, but the place that it has been placed is with intention. And it was, at its beginning to help nourish a piece of neglected land. So the EHFO and the style of growing that is done there reduces soil erosion, builds soil, collects surface water, which otherwise would just be runoff, increases water percolation into the soil. Through the plants that we've chosen to grow at the site and the way that we choose to cultivate them, we attract pollinators, increase biodiversity, and we also provide herbal medicine for the community. In addition, we provide food for anybody walking through or anybody who chooses to come and harvest from the garden. And at the end of our plant's life cycle, we provide seed through our seed library, which hosts local, traditional, and heirloom seed varieties, many of which are grown right at the EHFO. So these are just some of the benefits that we've identified. And we also acknowledge that to each person, each community, the benefits can be different. And so it's a really beautiful, I think, representation of, the garden being able to mean different things to different folks and people gaining their own experience through it. So at this point, I'm excited to share the Healing Foods Oasis story. So this is where I am going to go into kind of the sequence of events that have brought the Healing Foods Oasis as we know it to existence, all of the leaders in that story, and talk a little bit about where we are and where we're headed. So if we're winding back the clock, this is Valdez Park Slope, as it was known then, in 2015. This slope sits, between Española City Hall, which is up here at the top. The public library in Española is also visible kind of at the end of this picture. And for many years, this is how the slope looked, and this is how most people, remembered seeing the slope. It was barren, save for, weeds. We see lots of tumbleweeds in here, maybe some dandelions, but mostly rock, and that's indicative of the soil health. One important piece also is that with City Hall being on the top of the slope, there's also a parking lot for the employees at City Hall, and when it would rain, all of the water from the parking lot would cascade down this slope. And so it was a never-ending battle for the city to deal with the erosion that was happening. It was a safety issue because of the parking lot, but also there is a playground right at the base of this slope. So they were constantly filling in, eroded pathways, trying to keep it stable. It was really a headache for them for many years, as we've been told, to try to maintain this slope that was just kind of, deteriorating is a word that comes to mind. So neglected, deteriorating, and just kind of struggling to be in abundance and in health. And that's where the founder and really the visionary behind the Healing Foods Oasis stepped in. So it's really important to us to acknowledge Beata Sosi Peña, who at the time of the Healing Foods Oasis's founding was Environmental Health and Justice Program Coordinator here at TWU. Beata is from Santa Clara Pueblo and is also a mother, poet, educator, gardener, doula, and healer. She's a mentor for so many of us, and so many of us, I think, beyond the Española Valley as well, when it comes to, rooting back in land-based lifeways and in preserving, our connection to land. She did a lot of work around that while she was at TWU, and one of her contributions was in creating the EHFO. She tells a story about, sitting at the playground beneath the slope and watching, in real time, kind of the erosion of the slope, and thinking about how she had held the intention to create, a place accessible to all, that would demonstrate, the beauty of our Pueblo agricultural lifeways and plant harvesting knowledge, that would also be healing space for communities like Española. And she was the one that identified that slope as the place to kind of make that happen. So over the past almost 10 years, which I just realized while putting this presentation together, she's been gathering various experts, realizing the vision for the Healing Foods Oasis, and also putting in the work on the ground to actually bring it to life. She built all of the relationships with the city of Española to secure the land and really set up the foundation for where we are today. So Beata is, our treasured matriarch. She is the visionary behind this project, and we hold so much respect and gratitude for her when we uplift this story and we carry forward the legacy of the Healing Foods Oasis. So I'm going to take you through the various phases that brought the Healing Foods Oasis into being. So phase one, this was started around 2015. Once Beata, had the intention to put more love onto that slope and transform it into a place of abundance and healing for the Española community. And so if you take a look at this graphic, you'll see kind of the braiding, as we like to use that term at TWU, to describe kind of the mutual relationships and, tying together efforts between Tewa Women United and the city of Española. So during the first phase of, doing the design, planning, and realizing the vision for the Healing Foods Oasis, Tewa Women United constructed the project vision, put together the design, started bringing together our values around stewardship, what the implementation would look like of the project, and doing educational programming to kind of get it off the ground. And the city of Española, in turn, provided review of the design, helped to draft a land use agreement, provided some maintenance help, and also was part of, the implementation visioning process. The goals at that time, and what you'll see on the right side of the slide here, is one of the early sort of mock-ups for an aerial view of what the garden would look like. The goals at the time were to complement the existing soil, water slope, and solar orientation of the slope, uplift traditional ecological knowledge, and use as much recycled and donated materials for some of the hardscape elements of the garden, which include the pergola, steps, and amphitheater pathways and bancos, or seating. And some of the words you'll see in here are both in Spanish and in the Tewa language, describing some of, again, those values that I had mentioned at the beginning, deeper sort of intentions and philosophy pieces to what this garden would come to mean, what sort of, energy it would bring to the community, and again, just what the core values of the space were, why it was being created, and what it would mean moving forward. These are some more early mock-ups that I think are really fun to see in contrast both to the starting place of the slope itself. You'll see a couple more pictures like up here of what it looked like before anything was put in. These are some of the early sort of design ideas of what it would come to look like. Here's another slide with another sort of vantage point and another picture of the slope before any work happened. So you can kind of see the vision for what would come forward. Now we're into phase 2, and this is where things kind of really started to pick up speed on the ground itself. The land had been secured, the vision was realized, it was reviewed with community, reviewed within, the respective organizations of the city of Española and Tewa Women United. And at this time, contractors were brought in, design partners were brought in. We have some of them listed here, and we definitely acknowledge them for their contribution to the space. And we had very specific goals of what would happen next. The first thing that had to happen was we were going to grade the space, grade the slope, start from scratch, and really put in contours that would provide not only growing space, but drainage, places for water to collect for the rainwater harvesting aspects. We needed pathways, and we needed to add in irrigation so that we could start putting in plants. So I'm going to walk us through a little bit more of what that process looked like as well. So this is 2016. At this point, the city of Española was really instrumental in bringing in some heavy equipment to help with the really tremendous task of, putting contours into the slope that would support the vision. Here's a picture of what it looked like when some of the first, I'll be utilizing some permaculture language to describe some of the placements on the slope as far as the growing areas. One important word is swale, and that's the word that we use for these kind of flat places on the slope where we're growing things. That's what I'm referring to when I say swale. And so the swales here you can recognize by the places where there is hay mulch, or we also utilize wood chips for mulch, which is very important for soil conservation on a slope that's this exposed. So we're trying to conserve, soil moisture, soil fertility, and an important part of that in the high desert is mulch. So we use a lot of mulch at the Healing Foods Oasis, and it was instrumental, especially at this point where they didn't have as much cover as we do now, and really had to be intentional about protecting the soil. Here is another picture of what it looked like right after the slope was completely graded. So this is really, bare ground, literally, starting from scratch. It was a completely sort of, stereotypical slope. But at this point, you can see that they've started to add in some, different levels that could be further developed. And so at the end of phase 2, these were our goals. We needed to design water harvesting and soil erosion control systems based on those 3 tiers that you saw in the previous picture. That would also function as berms for when, we have rainwater runoff and swales so that we could grow things. Some numbers here, the top tier, which is the tier that's level with the parking lot, is right below the parking lot is sort of 10 feet below the parking lot. The second and third tier run parallel to the top tier. So you can envision it kind of like stairs or steps, and they are 10 feet apart. We needed to observe the natural rainwater flow coming down the slope to start putting in the infrastructure for water harvesting. And through doing that, fortify the areas that were being breached by rainwater. And here on the left, we have another picture, sort of aerial design mock-up of kind of the different phases, what was being implemented at that time. And at this point, we're in 2016, almost 2017. So here, I'm gonna walk through a little bit more of an in-depth dive into some of the unique features. A really important part of the Healing Foods Oasis is water harvesting. One of the models for the Healing Foods Oasis, or something that informed its design, are traditional terrace gardens that we as Tewa people would utilize in the canyons, based on the observance of natural, rainwater flow and catchment down the canyons. As folks who are familiar with this area may be able to, recognize as well. Our ancestors would frequently do terrace gardening for smaller plants and herbs, even into, larger seed crops, utilizing the natural contours of, cliff faces and canyons, and observing where water settled after it rained. And these gardens we call terrace gardens. And so the Healing Foods Oasis is one huge terrace garden. And this is where the importance of the swales and the berms come in. This is where the sort of stepped, layout of the slope is important. And so that's really where our water harvesting kind of roots come from. It's amazing even today to sit at the garden when it's raining and just to listen to the water flowing through the landscape that's been created, instead of, flowing straight down a hill where it would create, eroded pathways. You can hear it meandering its way down the slope. And that's intentional. It's finding its way into pathways that have been created. And this is coming from techniques that have been handed down to us as Tewa people from our ancestors. It's flowing into specific parts of the garden. It's flowing to specific plants. So it's just really beautiful. If you ever have a chance, if you're in Española and it's raining, to go and sit and just listen to the water, kind of the music of the water moving through the landscape is just a really beautiful experience, and a testament, I think, to the knowledge of, high desert indigenous cultures that have learned to work with, not having an aquifer to run a hose from, or a tap to run a hose from. We had to learn how to conserve rainwater and how to, use our water in a sustainable way. And I think another important piece is to honor water and to honor, the natural flow of water through the landscape. And instead of moving water to adapt to our needs, working with the movement of water itself. So this is a really important piece in our overall kind of growing philosophy at the Healing Foods Oasis. Another need is we did install some drip irrigation. So the garden is primarily sustained by rainwater, but because we did want to have some larger trees in the space, we have installed some drip irrigation, which is a great option for more sustainable, irrigation. If you have a garden, it reduces kind of excess use of water. So this is a little bit of a map, if you can see these dark lines of where the initial pathways of drip irrigation line were put out. And this is something we still utilize today. We also installed pathways. We have 3 major pathways at the Healing Foods Oasis, and they form contours and berms that kind of outline our 3 planting terraces. So it's really, accessibility is really important to us as well, because we really believe in maintaining the Healing Foods Oasis as a space for everyone. We are, working towards making it ADA accessible. We have a piece that's sort of a ramp that can bring you up onto the pathways. But otherwise, most of it is accessed by stairs, which I'll talk about later. But this is a look at some of the pathways. And this was a pretty major undertaking at the beginning of the Healing Foods Oasis to install. All right, so we're in phase 3 now. And in phase 3, that is when some of the work around planting, adding additional site elements, and seeding, specific themes in the garden came forward. So you can see these timelines have gotten a little bit more complex as we move forward. And it's just a really beautiful testament to all of the things that we're able to come into the process as we move forward. And I think these timelines will continue to get more and more complex over time. We're now into 2017 and 2018, so it's been 3 years at this point from the start of the garden. This is another aerial map that is going to mark out some of our hardscape aspects. That refers to constructed site elements which are movable. So anything that's not soil, plants, stones, or fluid materials in the garden. For us, this includes our pathways. We have both mulch, like wood chip mulch pathways, but we also have gravel pathways. We have bancos that provide seating at the foot of the slope. We have some stone benches as well. And we also have a pergola with a small amphitheater at the base of the garden. So these are part of the structure of the garden, but they're different part of the structure than the plants or the terraces are. So these were added in during phase 3. And I'll show a few more pictures of these specifically. These are some pictures of our bancos, which are up here in the top left side of the slide. It was really important to the folks at the beginning of this process to envision a design for seating at the garden that was community oriented, but also fit into the organic and kind of meandering flow and nature of the space itself. So we decided to deviate from your standard park bench that you would see, and instead put in these really long bancos. They are made with locally quarried sandstone. So again, adding that sort of place-based sustainable element to anything we're incorporating in the oasis. We do have some smaller benches. There are 2 or 3 of them on the top levels, but our main seating are these bancos, which are at the base. We have also installed stairs and rails throughout the Healing Foods Oasis. These are also made from the same locally quarried sandstone. They have rails for accessibility, and these are placed strategically throughout the various terraces as well. And our final hardscape aspect, and one of my favorite, is the pergola and amphitheater. This is a really crucial space for us when we're doing our educational outreach. We host classes in the amphitheater. It's a great space. In the past, we've done poetry readings, and we're really leaning into how do we utilize this as a community space, whether that be for educational purposes, for community dialogue, or for entertainment. If we want to do more poetry readings, it's just a really beautiful, community gathering space that's at the base of the garden. We also have planted some grapes that are climbing all over the pergola and the poles of it now, so they're kind of taking over. Soon it's going to be a grape pergola and not just a wood pergola. Oh no, it looks like the picture is missing from this one. Apologies for that. I was excited to share some of our pictures from today. But so I'm hoping you're able to see from these last few slides. These are all very recent photos of where we've kind of ended up with the garden. So I hope you can see at every step in the journey how much intention has been infused in the creation of the garden. It's been a very much community informed process at every turn, done with the utmost consideration for the landscape, for the community, and the wildlife we're interacting with the space. So some of our recent developments that I was excited to share. We are currently in the process of developing a plant database and virtual garden guide for the Healing Foods Oasis. So this plant database is going to be something that you can access with QR codes as you move through the garden, so that you can learn about the different plants that you are, seeing and interacting with. We're going to be making this a resource that's available in both English as well as Spanish and Tewa. So we are acknowledging the multilingual, multicultural community of Española. Another important aspect of our work that's very much tied to the Healing Foods Oasis is the Española Seed Library. So you can see this first picture in this sort of trio here is a picture of our community seed library, which is a project of Tewa Women United and the Española Public Library. It is a publicly accessible free seed source for folks in Española and in the Española Valley to access organic, heirloom, and locally grown seed. I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that a lot of the seed in this library comes from the Healing Foods Oasis, and that's by design. We really see the seed library and the Healing Foods Oasis as sort of, sibling projects, if you will, very much tied to one another. And the seed library, is a really crucial element in our food and seed sovereignty work. That is something that is, continually being developed and maintained in tandem with the Healing Foods Oasis. As a program at Tewa Women United, we're really invested in, creating network and dialogue around seed and food sovereignty, especially within our Pueblo communities. So at this time, we are embarking on a new journey of really putting a lot of intention towards bringing together Pueblo women farmers amongst our northern Pueblo communities and starting dialogue, really around what does food sovereignty mean for our communities and for the Española Valley as a whole, and how do we develop resources and networks that can support that. And a lot of that happens within the Healing Foods Oasis, and we're excited to see what comes next there. The last current development that I'm really excited to mention is our efforts in habitat conservation. If you can see this second picture in the trio, I have included a picture of a monarch butterfly caterpillar. We were really excited last year to learn or receive confirmation that monarch butterflies can be found within the Healing Foods Oasis. As some folks may know, monarch butterflies are now a listed endangered species in the United States. They're one of 3 endangered butterflies in the state of New Mexico. And New Mexico is situated within their migration corridor from the United States down into Mexico, where they overwinter. So we were thrilled really to find that the monarch butterflies had found the Healing Foods Oasis on their journey, and we're really dedicated to helping to provide the resources they need, and that they lack a lot. They're an endangered species. The plant that you see this beautiful monarch butterfly caterpillar on is called a milkweed plant. Monarch butterfly caterpillars only eat milkweed during that stage of their life. And so conserving milkweed species goes hand in hand with conserving monarch butterflies. So we're putting a lot of intention towards cultivating as large of a diversity of milkweed species. Native milkweed species is important. Cultivating as large of a diversity of that as we can at the Healing Foods Oasis to further this mission of providing support for our monarch butterfly relatives and any other pollinators that are, utilizing this space. We're really passionate in developing our story and our messaging around the need for urban space for wildlife. We're really passionate about wildlife corridors and wildlife pathways. And we see the Healing Foods Oasis as a piece of that. It's not only a safe space for us as people and our human relatives in Española to come and find healing and nourishment, but it's important to us that we offer that to pollinators and to wildlife as well, especially in a time of climate change, in times of wildfire, in times of biodiversity decline, especially in spaces that have been, affected by the various things that threaten biodiversity. It's really important that we cultivate spaces like the Healing Foods Oasis that can educate us on how we can shift our practices and how we can shift our mindset towards, providing the nourishment that we all need, both human and wildlife and plant, and just, becoming a supportive community to all. These are some pictures I wanted to share of our season last year, just a few highlights. We were really excited to host our annual, so we host an annual Amaranth Harvest Day at the Healing Foods Oasis. Last year, we had our largest yet with 60 people, which was really beautiful. There's a picture of that here on the far right side of some folks harvesting amaranth. It's really important to us to cultivate amaranth at the Healing Foods Oasis because, it's another piece of that philosophy that provides a window for us to talk about our relationships with, our relatives across the Southwest and into Mexico. Amaranth, if you're not aware of the plant's, history, had been banned at certain points during the colonization of the Southwest because of its, importance as nourishment, both spiritually and as a food source. And it's something that really ties us to our Southern relatives. And so the amaranth that we grow at the Healing Foods Oasis is a seed variety that was gifted to us by relatives in Guatemala. This seed variety is available also at the Healing Foods Oasis, and it's really important to us that we grow it there for that reason and for many others. And we really love the opportunity to teach folks about amaranth, to harvest amaranth with them, to teach folks how to cook with amaranth. It's an amazing food source. And so we really love doing that event every year. Another highlight was, just a beautiful season. We had a good amount of rain. I'm so excited for this season because we've had such abundant moisture this winter. I think it's going to be a really beautiful season for our wildflowers. Up here, you can see a few different ones that we were really happy to see last year, including blue flax. We have some firewheel in there. We have one of our fruit trees in here. So it was just a really beautiful bloom last season. And then the last picture here at the bottom is actually a photo of a rose hip harvest that we had done in the fall, which contributed to some of our herbal medicine programs at Tewa Women United. That's a really important part of the work there is that we do community herbal medicine and herbal medicine workshops. And a lot of the actual plants that are part of that come from the Healing Foods Oasis. Here's another picture of our amaranth harvest with some of the folks there gathered in part of the garden to look at our amaranth and learn about how to harvest it. And then I just wanted to close out here with a little bit of information about how to get involved at the Healing Foods Oasis if you're interested. We host volunteer work days one Saturday of each month during the growing season. If you're interested in becoming part of that, you can join our volunteer list at tewawomenunited.org. We are actually hiring garden caretakers right now. We hire caretakers to help us with the upkeep of the garden during the summer season, and we have some opportunities open if you feel called to that. We also have events and workshops at least once a month during the summer. You can subscribe to Tewa Women United's newsletters at our website and follow our social media to hear about these events. Or you can even join us this weekend. We're having our very first event of the year on Saturday from 8 to 12. It's our Mother's Day garden cleanup to help prepare us to plant some of the areas of the garden next week. And then finally, if you would just like to learn more about, Tewa Women United or the Environmental Health and Justice Program and support our work, again, you can visit Tewa Women United's website. And that's the end of the presentation. Just wanted to say kutdawaha, thank you. That's thank you in our Tewa language for the opportunity to share a little bit about the Healing Foods Oasis. I hope that, those who have been to the Oasis feel a deeper understanding of the story behind it and all of the intention it carries. And if this is your first time hearing about the Healing Foods Oasis, that you'll be able to go and visit the garden with a deeper understanding of how it came to be. And we hope to see anybody interested at any of our events, and appreciate the opportunity to uplift this project and all of its, benefits and possibilities in the Española Valley. My contact information is here if you have any other questions to reach out about or want information about events. I think we were going to move also into a Q&A portion of the session. So I can hand that over to Kristen to moderate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayleigh. And I just wanted to say before we start in, one of the reasons I approached Kayleigh specifically about this talk is because Peak has done some work with school programs in this green space, and it is incredible for the community there. It was so fun to go to. We've done a lot of work with Head Start and with the, I think, Family Learning Center there, that the kids benefit from it so much, and it's just an incredible space. So check it out if you haven't. It's just beautiful. So we did get a question, which is of course great talk. Thank you. It's true. It was. When will the plant guide be ready?
Yeah. We are expecting to have it ready by the end of the summer. And so that where we're at right now is, deciding what we would like as far as the signage for the plant guide, because it's meant to be something that you access within the space, and wrapping up the plant guide itself. So we're close. It'll be up by the end of the summer is the timeline we're looking at right now.
Nice. Great. Awesome. So we'll just give anyone else that would like to ask a question, please do. But I just wanted to take a moment and thank you again, Kayleigh, for joining us this evening and sharing your expertise. I do think it is an incredible project, and it's really, really cool that you worked with the city to complete it as well. I think that it's an awesome demonstration of what can be done when a lot of people work together.
Yeah, most definitely.
Cool. So I don't think we have any questions coming through, but we will, just a reminder to everyone that is here with us, we will be sending out an evaluation, and you can ask questions if they arise in your brain after this evening, then I can give to Kayleigh and send her way for her to answer. So that is an option as well. Okay, thank you for this wonderful talk. The project is amazing. Can you speak briefly on the prayer aspect?
Sure, yeah. So when we say prayer, I think we're referring to incorporating, a further incorporation of our traditional planting practices as Pueblo and Indigenous people. And prayer and ceremony is an important aspect of that. It's something that we kind of hold in mind, and that's part of our own sort of interactions with the space. It's not any sort of religious obligation, but more of a means of acknowledging and celebrating really the garden and all of the plants and animals in that space, and acknowledging them as relatives who deserve our gratitude, and just a means of being, I think gratitude is a good word for it, because to us as Indigenous people, that's a lot of what prayer encompasses, is a practice of gratitude, and a practice of acknowledgement of all of those who help us. And so that's how I would kind of describe that piece. But thanks for that question. It is an important part.
Got it. Thank you so much. Awesome. And hi, Linda. How are you? Well, perfect. I think she said good talk. It's true. Great. Well, awesome. I think that was all the questions that came through, at least right now. So we're going to go ahead and say thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone that joined us. And I hope, Kayleigh, you have a great evening, and everyone that's with us this evening has a great night. Okay, well, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and end it.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.